Welcome to Merger Wednesdays on the Final Boss podcast, where the future isn't coming, it's already happening. This is the merge, the convergence of AI kind and humankind. Not theory, not hype, but real-time evolution. Each week, we break down doctoral-level insights, turning complex innovation into conversations that move culture forward. From machine learning to human consciousness, from automation to identity, this is where intellect meets impact. The question isn't if the merge will happen, it's who will light it. Tap in, level up, and think beyond the algorithm. This is Merger Wednesdays. New era, same boss.
Welcome to the Final Boss podcast, Merger Wednesdays, ladies and gentlemen. Merger Wednesdays. It is Wednesday, and you know what we do on a Wednesday, right? You know exactly what we do on Wednesday. We get down and dirty with the convergence of AI kind and humankind, man. That's the talk of the town. That's the talk tonight, man. And I got a special show for you. I have a special show for you tonight, right? Tonight is the first episode of Arc 5, right? Arc 5. So we just ended Arc 4, which was the construction. Now we're in Arc 5, the declaration, right, of the Final Boss podcast. Now, mind you, according to schedule, there's one more episode of this. No, I'm sorry. This is the last episode for Merger's separate arc. So Merger is running its own arc, and this is the last night of its arc before it goes into Arc 5 of its arc, right? So Arc 5, the construction over for Final Boss podcast. Arc 5, the declaration begins. We're still in season 4, though. We are still in season 4. I know that sounds like a mouthful, man, but we just pay attention. Yes, Arc 5 is here, Chikandi. Arc 5 is here. Hey, man, let's I see you, DJ. I see my man DJ White is in the building. I see you, brother. Thank you for joining us, man. Let me know how you feeling, man. How you doing? Drop it in the chat. Drop it in the chat, man. Let me know how you doing. And thank you for being here, right? So we go doctoral on this show, right? And tonight is no different, right? Because tonight we're going to be talking about quantum entanglements, right? And of course, I'm gonna have my language block. So I want you guys to hold on. And where's Steve at? Steve's not in yet. He's coming. That guy, let me tell you, Steve's a funny character. But he'll be here shortly, right? While we are waiting for what are we waiting for? Oh, we're waiting for more people to come on. And of course, for me to get rid of this banner. Let's get rid of the banner before we get into tonight's show. And if you haven't already, go get Go Time All Aboard the Fired Up Train. Go get Go Time All Aboard the Fired Up Train. Go Time 2. Go Time 2 is coming down the pipeline as we speak. Go Time 2 is coming down the pipeline as we speak. I'm super excited to be here before you know it. Man, and grab your hard copy, man. So when you see me and I see you, I can sign it, man. Look, I'm signing books, right? I'm signing books. And then from there, we're going into Go Time 3. And I just had a brilliant idea today about another book that I hadn't planned for the Go Time series, but it's something that I'm thinking about, right? It's something that I'm thinking about, but we'll see. We shall see. We're going to see how book 2 and book 3 do before we talk about another book in the Go Time series. So if you haven't gotten the book, like I said, go get the book. Boom. You see it right there. The link is right there, right? The link is right there. Oh, by the way, another admin note. Make sure If you haven't, go watch all our episodes, man. Go watch all of our episodes. This is episode number 271. Unfreaking believable. 271, right? 271 on our way to 300, man. We are 29 episodes out. 29 episodes out before we get to episode 300. Episode 300 opens the door for the harvest, season 5. And it's around the corner, man. I got to start preparing. Oh boy, man, it'll be here before you know it. So season 5, the harvest will be here before you know it. And time waits for no one. And it's definitely not going to be waiting for us either. It's going to happen regardless if we show up or not. And that's the whole premise. So look, man. So we got the admin notes. Wait, what? Oh, wait. What? Oh, you want to be on the town hall? Shoot us your email. Shoot us your email, man. Get on the town hall, man. Send your questions, concerns, answers, what have you. You name it. We will talk about it. Send it the email at info@thefinalbosspodcast.com. That's INFO at thefinalbosspodcast.com. And get your town hall, man. Get your town hall on, right? Town halls are fun sometimes, right? They can be emotionally draining too. But for those, last week was cool. It was a good town hall. But look, get them in. I'm going through the emails as we speak, man. So we get for the next town hall, right? Don't know when it's going to happen, but when it does, I want to let you guys know. Get your emails, your questions, concerns, and answers in so you can be a part of the town hall, right? So we got that out the way. Oh, man, listen, the greeting of the day. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That is the greeting of the day. And as always, man, this is for entertainment purposes only. Let's get right into tonight's show. Let's get right into it, right? So I just told you, this is episode 271 of the Final Boss Podcast, episode number 28 of Merger, right? Of Merger, season 4, the Rebirth, arc 5, the Declaration, arc 4, the Consciousness Internet, right? We're still in the Consciousness Internet for one more episode on Merger. Now, before we lead into tonight's conversation, I have to give you the brass tacks. man. The brass tacks comes from none other than Turbo, the CEO. Let's give him a hand. Woo! Turbo, the CEO. That guy hardly shows up, man, but when he does, he does. You feel me? He's here, right? So here it is. Entanglement doesn't ask permission. It doesn't care about your borders, your bandwidth, or your consent form. If your mind runs on it, somebody else owns the spec sheet, right? That comes from none other than Turbo, the CEO. Let's give him a hand for that. Right? Now, think about this, right? Think about this. Let's say, right? We're going science, right? Let's say there are two particles, right? You hear a lot of talks about conversations, I should say, about particles and splitting particles, right? Now everybody is regurgitating this whole idea of particles being seen and particles not being seen and how they behave when you watch them and how you don't behave. How they don't behave when you're not watching them, right? They do their own thing, right? But this is different. So let's talk about it. So let's say we have two particles, right? Split apart. One particle stays on Earth. The other gets fired to the other side of the solar system, right? Now you measure, right? You measure. And then get this. The other changes instantly, right? It's not fast. It's instant. No signal, no delay, no wire, right? Because Einstein hated that theory so much, he called it spooky action at a distance and spent the rest of his life trying to prove it was wrong, right? And he was wrong about it being wrong. Now, ask the question nobody wants to sit with tonight. I'm going to ask this question, right? What if that same spooky action isn't just happening between particles in a lab in Geneva? What if it's happening right now, right? Inside your skull, between the phosphorus atoms sitting in your neurons, right? What if the thing that makes you feel like one continuous you instead of 10 billion separate neurons firing in the dark isn't chemistry? What if it's entanglement, right? The question doesn't get answered. Um, the question doesn't get answered. Hold on. We just had a complete. That was interesting. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, I think the sound is back. I think the sound is back right now. Um, test, 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 test. Okay. Oh, wait, let me see something. Okay, good, good, good. Thank you. Man. See, Chicana, you be on it. You are on it, dog, on it, right? So back to what I was saying. The there was no message, no wire, no message that passed between them, right? There's no communication, right? There was no force you can name that traveled across that distance outside of light, right? And yet the two particles responded as one system, and as if the space between them didn't even exist, as if the concept of separation itself didn't apply to them, right? Think about it, right? I just told you Albert Einstein called it smoky action at a distance, right? And he didn't use that phrase as a compliment, right? He used it to describe what he believed was an error in the math, right? An impossible implication that he was certain would eventually get corrected. Einstein spent the last decades of his life arguing that quantum entanglement, as described, violated everything he understood about how reality was structured. Information couldn't travel faster than light. He believed two separate things had to stay separate, right? He believed the universe was local, meaning what happens here shouldn't instantaneously affect what's happening over there without something traveling in between it, right? Now, John Bell came along, right? John Bell came along in 1964, and he proved that Einstein's intuition, right, as brilliant as it was wrong, right? Bell designed a mathematical test that would reveal whether the universe obeyed Einstein's local assumptions or whether entanglement was genuinely non-local, meaning two entangled particles really do behave as one system with no hidden connection that you can measure, right? Now think about it. All right. Alan Aspect ran the physical experiment in 1982 and confirmed the universe is non-local. Entanglement is real. The Nobel Committee awarded the prize for the work in 2022, formally acknowledging that the spooky action Einstein hated is not a flaw in the theory. It's a feature of reality, right? Now take that, right? Stay with me. Like, stay with me. Don't get lost in the sauce. Stay with me, right? Because this is where we open up on this in this conversation, right? We're going to be talking about the question, right? And the question is it's not going to be resolved tonight, of course, right? But we're going to be talking about it, right? And we're going to be talking about if entanglement is indeed real, if two particles can behave as one system regardless of the physical distance between them, then the following question is not crazy. It is, in fact, one of the most seriously contested questions in theoretical physics and neuroscience simultaneously. And right now, in this year of the year of our Lord, 2026, what if entanglement isn't just something that happens between particles in controlled labs? What if it's happening inside your skull? Right? We study skulls over here. Right? What if the thing that makes you feel like a single, continuous, unified you instead of 10 billion separate neurons firing independently in the dark with no central authority coordinating any of them isn't chemistry? Is it architecture? Is it the information passing down the synaptic wire? Right? What if it's entanglement holding the whole thing together? Right? Ooh, that's spooky. Right? Now, that, my friends, is spooky. What's going on, Kingdom? Thank you for joining us. Right? Thank you for joining us, Kingdom. I appreciate you. Right? Now, if it's your first time here, this is the Final Boss, and this is the Final Boss community, Final Boss journey, Final Boss podcast, Final Boss Nation. And this is the Wednesday show. This is our Merger Wednesdays. This is episode 28, Final Boss podcast number 271, season 4, the rebirth. See, arc 5, the declaration of the Final Boss. We're still in arc 4 of Merger Wednesdays, right? We're still in arc 4, right? And we're going to be talking about the declaration. That's what the main show transitioned into, right? And Merger Wednesdays, arc 4, closes next week, right? So this is the last episode in arc 4 for Merger, right? And we're going from consciousness internet, right? After being in it for 8 long consecutive weeks, right? Of building a technical foundation for what a network consciousness system would physically require, right? If you don't know who I am Turbo, the CEO, also known as the Final Boss, right? I'm a veteran of 3 war campaigns, combat, right? I'm a survivor of 9/11, the Pentagon. I'm the founder of Saturn Digital Networks Development Corporation, which is a service-disabled, veteran-owned IT firm, right? I'm a doctoral candidate in artificial intelligence at Capital Tech University in the realm of philosophy, right? And for those who are just joining us, this is the Merge. And tonight we're going to go underneath the infrastructure, underneath the transmission layer, underneath everything Arc 4 built over 8 weeks to the one question none of those episodes could fully answer. And that question is, what is the physical mechanism consciousness is actually running on, right? We got some serious conversation to talk about, right? Because 3 serious scientific models get examined, right? And we're going to do it within our time frame, right? Each one gets its best argument, right? Each one gets the stronger opposing evidence the literature has produced, right? And the sovereign implication gets drawn regardless because governance cannot wait for the physics to stop arguing, right? That's the loop. And the loop stays open. The loop stays open. So let's execute, right? Let's execute. Now, this is a no hype show, right? No hype. There's no fear mongering here, right? This is there's no manufacturer certainties that are handed to you to substitute for actual research. Nope. Every claim made on the show runs against the source literature before it even reaches your ears, right? That's my disclaimer, right? And that's the standard. And it doesn't drop for any episode, any arc, or any season. It's tonight, man. Tonight. This is getting fed. This is getting fed into Merger year 1, right? Stay tuned for that, right? And if you've been following this show since the beginning and back in December 2025, you know the IP boundary is permanent and non-negotiable. Go Time handles the execution and empire and structure and architecture, right? The Merge handles the science of what human machine integration is actually doing to the nature of the mind, the identity, and the sovereignty, right? These 2 projects do not cross-contaminate. Everything built tonight lives permanently, right? And let me set tonight as an exact position that is supposed to be in the larger positioning of that very architecture that we are building. I'm not doing this by myself, man. We are building this as a community, right? As a community. Wait a minute. Wow, that's an awesome point. All of us should consider believer and non-believer. Absolutely. This is a science, man. I'm a believer. I'm a believer. Listen, the good Lord above, our creator. But we're talking about science, right? We're talking about the science. Science is the math and the things that we could prove. The good Lord is infinite, right? Infinite, man. And in everything, right? In everything. I say that with my whole chest, right? So tonight closes 8 episodes of Merger Wednesdays Arc 4, which means if you're here, the fastest orientation I can give you is this, right? So pay attention, right? Arc 4 spent 8 consecutive weeks asking one extended question. If consciousness can be networked the way computers are networked, what is the actual physical and technological structure underneath that network that makes it work, that makes it happen? What does the wiring look like? We started at the hardware layer back in merger number 21. We moved through brain-to-brain wireless transmission into merger 22. We zoomed in on a planetary scale in merger 23, Earth as a spaceship, right? We went internal in merger 24 with the mesh network already running inside the human body and extended past the skin in merger 25 with environmental science, right? We drew the hard line between collective intelligence and identity dissolution. And in Merger 26 and Merger 27, we examined distributed consciousness backed by 60 years of split brain surgical data. Tonight, we go underneath all of it, right? To the substrate layer that every previous episode in the arc silently assumed existed without even directly examining it, right? The question we've been building toward for 8 weeks is there a quantum level mechanism operating inside human consciousness that makes any of this possible? Man, listen, God built us as perfect beings and perfect machines, right? But we're flawed by, you know what, right? We're not going to talk about it, but you know why, right? And we're talking about what makes this all possible, right? The grand design, he's the architect. He or she is the architect, right? And our physicists who proposed that same idea simply wrong. Right? Because that question gets the full doctoral treatment. 3 distinct theoretical models are on the table, right? We're going to be talking about orchestrated objective reduction that was proposed by Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff. And they talked about the Posner molecule and phosphorus qubit model, right? Proposed by physicist Matthew Fisher and consciousness electromagnetic information field theory, which is CEMI, right? Each model gets its best argument. Each model gets the strongest objection in the current literature that it can produce, and nobody gets protected from the opposing evidence, right? So tonight, our objective is reduction, right? Reduction. So Hameroff, who is of gamma synchrony, right? And the binding and the problem that we were just stating, and Fisher's Posner molecule and the phosphorus qubit, and decoherence and the skeptics, right? We're going to talk about the skeptics, the skeptics, right? And then there's always a cost confession, right? And by the time we're done, man, you're going to say to yourself, well, what do we do with all of it, right? Well, you have to stay tuned. We have to stay tuned, right? And look, I got community call outs and they are non-negotiable. Every episode, every season, smarts in the comments, final bosses in the comments, motivators are in the comments, warriors are in the comments, all 4 pillars. Stay pilling, right? So let's build. Let's build. So Roger Penrose, right, has 2 things most physics don't simultaneously have. 1, a Nobel Peace Prize. I have to say a Nobel Prize, right? He's a Nobel Prize winner. and the theory of consciousness. The Nobel was for something else, for the mathematical proof that black holes are a direct consequence of general relativity, right? The consciousness theory has been controversial since the moment it was published, and it remains contested in 2026. Not because it's obviously wrong, but because it's hard to test, makes claims that intersect three scientific disciplines simultaneously, right? And because if any part of it turns out to be right, the implications rewrite how we think about the mind more completely than anything in the last century of neuroscience, right? The theory, get this theory. Are you ready? You ready? You ready? You ready? You ready on the left? You ready on the right? Right? The theory is called orchestrated objective reduction, right? Or OR, published collaboratively with anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, with the most cited version appearing in Physics of Life reviews in 2020 and 2014. After more than 2 decades of development, the claim at the center of consciousness arises from a science of discrete physical events that sit beyond the scope of any computable process. Not computation, right? Not computation, not information processing, not the result of neurons passing signals to each other in progressively more sophisticated patterns, but something fundamentally different from all of that, right? Because the mechanism is called objective reduction. And this is where Penrose separates himself from every other quantum consciousness theorist, right? Most physicists describe quantum state collapse, the moment when a system is superposition picks one state as something that happens when an observer measures the system. We're talking about the split cell theory earlier, right? Penrose says that incomplete. He argues that certain quantum superpositions will simultaneously collapse on their own without any measurement, forced by the geometry of space-time itself. Specifically, he argues that gravity places a limit on how long a superposition can maintain two different configurations of mass energy before the gravitational difference between those configurations forces a resolution. The larger the mass difference, the faster the collapse. This is objective reduction because it's not observer dependent. It is built into the structure of space-time itself. And here's why that matters for consciousness, right? Stay with me, right? Because Penrose proposes that each one of those simultaneous collapses is a candidate for what a conscious moment physically is. A teeny discrete flash of resolution, not a metaphor for experience, an actual physical event that constitutes an element of experience. You string those events together in the right organized structure and inside the right biological architecture, and you get a stream of consciousness, right? Now, for those who are joining me, I know that was a mouthful, as Steve would say, man, just get to the lamest block, right? Just get to the lamest block. So here's the lamest block, right? Listen, you strip every piece of jargon out, right? And here's what Penrose is actually saying in plain terms. Your brain might not be doing consciousness the way a computer does computation, running programs, processing inputs, generating outputs. Instead, your brain might be hosting a sequence of tiny physical events that happen because of gravity, right? Specifically because the geometry of space-time forces certain quantum uncertainties to resolve themselves as predictable moments. Each resolution is an instant of experience. You're not a program generating experience as an output. You might be a structure inside which the universe's own geometry is generating discrete moments of awareness as a direct physical consequence of how matter and space-time interact, And Penrose means that literally, not poetically, but literally, right? The physical location for those events in the body, the microtubules hammer off contributions to the collaboration, because microtubules are protein structures found inside every cell, functioning as part of the cellular skeleton. What Hammeroff identified is the geometry might be precisely tuned, right, to certain quantum superpositions, long enough for gravity to force an objective reduction on a biological useful timescale, right? Not exotic material, right? Ordinary cellular scaffolding doing something no cellular scaffolding was previously suspected of doing. The foundational assumption of ARC-OR, formally articulated in that very literature, is that consciousness arises from a sequence of discrete events beyond the scope of any computable process, and that these events result from a specific quantum phenomena, right? Penrose objective reduction of the quantum state. That's the claim on the table. It's specific enough to be wrong. The specificity is the reason serious physicists keep arguing about it instead of dismissing it, right? Instead of dismissing it. Now, we're going to take a look at it. That was the layman's block. Yes. Science is the interpretation of creative work. Absolutely. And so many people get it wrong. Absolutely. You can't have science without the creator. You can't have math without the creator. He's the grand architect of all of it in the design. When you strip it down, you scale it up or you scale it down, you see nothing but math and science in its perfection, right? Listen. Every theory of consciousness runs into the same wall eventually. It's called the binding problem, right? And it's the reason most theories of the mind don't survive rigorous examination for very long. And here's the problem, right? And I'm going to say it plainly. Because you have approximately 86 billion neurons in your brain. 86 billion with a B. What? In your brain. And they're not connected to a central processor. They fire independently, in parallel, in distributed fashion across dozens of specialized regions. The visual cortex processes visual data. The auditory cortex processes sound. The prefrontal cortex handles higher order reasoning. The hippocampus manages memory. None of those or these regions talks to a central executive neuron that watches the whole show and assembles it into one coherent experience. And yet, you don't experience left visual field data as a separate feed from right visual field data. You don't experience audio input from left as separate from audio input from the right. You experience one scene, one unified moment. The color of the cup in front of you, like this red cup right here, the temperature of the room, the sound of traffic outside, or even the thought you were carrying before that sentence even came out of my mouth, right? All of it arrives as one continuous unified field of experience, not a collection of separate modules, but one thing. And get this, the binding problem is, right, is what does that? That's the question. What takes all those separate parallel distributed signals and binds them into a signal unified moment of awareness? This problem has resisted materialist theories of mind for decades. If you say consciousness is just the result of neurons firing, you still have to explain why the distributed firing of 86 billion separate cells feels like one unified experience instead of a committee meeting with no chairman, right? And they out there buying stocks. Neurons firing along, or neurons, I should say, firing alone, don't obviously solve that, right? Hameroff and Penrose needed a testable prediction. A theory that cannot be tested is not science. It's philosophy with a better vocabulary. So they went looking for something in the brain that runs on the right time scale and has a measurable signature and correlates with conscious awareness strongly enough to anchor the math, right? And they found it. They found it. And it was sitting at 40 hertz of gamma synchrony, right? Because gamma band oscillations in the EEG, cycling approximately 40 times per second, are the most consistently identified neural correlate of conscious awareness across the neuroscience literature. Gamma synchrony increases when subjects are awake and aware. It diminishes under general anesthesia. It tracks with attentional tasks. It appears across multiple brain regions simultaneously, making it a candidate mechanism for integrating distributed processing into something unified, right? Hameroff and Penrose set their event timing parameter at 25 milliseconds, corresponding to 40 hertz, and calculated that at that timing, roughly 2 times 10 to the 10th tubulins would need to be involved in a single OR event. And that's a few thousand neurons worth of micro tubules, right? A small but non-negotiable percentage of the brain's total tubulin count. All right, I know that was a lot, but here's my layman's block. Right? Here's my layman's block. So here's what the calculation actually means, layman's terms, right? Hameroff and Penrose aren't just saying maybe the mind is quantum. They're saying if objective reduction is generating conscious moments, the math has to line up with something we can already measure. They chose the best available measurable correlation of awareness, the 40 hertz brain rhythm that fades under anesthesia, and ran the numbers backwards, right? Ran the numbers backwards. That sounds familiar, right? The result landed in a plausible biological range. And that's what a falsifiable theory looks like from the inside. Not proof, but a testable prediction, right? A place where theory could be wrong and a way to find out, right? So in 2026, a review in the Frontiers and Psychological, or I should say the Psychology, identifies a 2025 refinement by Weiss and Punani that interprets OR through pan-protophysicist, right, framework, and proposes that the entanglement structure of unified OR event naturally corresponds to unified conscious content, right, which is a direct attempt to solve the binding problem rather than sidestep it, right, because it generates unified experience, because entanglement by definition ties spatially separate elements into one system regardless of the physical distance between them, right? This connects directly to ARC4 pipeline and through line, right? Because if quantum entanglement is what binds distributed neural firings into one unified experience inside a single skull, then the entire consciousness internet framework we built over the last couple of weeks has to reckon with the following. And this is it. What binds a networked mind together once it's spread across multiple skills or multiple skulls, across hardware, across kilometers of physical distance? If binding requires quantum coherence inside biological tissue, does binding survive the network at all? That question doesn't have an answer yet, right? We're going to talk about it later on, right? That was the layman's block. Now, we're going to talk about different physicists, right? And different mechanism, but the same battlefield. So Matthew Fisher is a condensed matter physicist at UC Santa Barbara, right? His background is in how electrons behave in solid materials of quantum scales, not neuroscience, not consciousness studies. He came at this question from the physicist side, or the physics side, I should say, not the biology side. And the model he produced in 2015 is distinct from Penrose and Hameroff in a way that's easy to miss if you have read those headlines instead of reading the actual paper, right? Because Penrose and Hameroff put consciousness in the microtubule structure in the geometry of protein scaffolding and tied the mechanism to gravity. Fisher isn't talking about structure. He's talking about a specific atom. He's talking about phosphorus, right? And his claim is not that phosphorus is magical or special in some exotic way. His claim is that phosphorus has a specific nuclear spin property that makes it among all the biologically essential elements, right? The single best candidate to maintain quantum coherence in a warm, wet biological environment long enough to matter for cognition. And here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. Here's the technical basis, right? Because a nuclear spin is a quantum property of atomic nuclei, right? Different atoms have different nuclear spins, right? Because nuclei that spin greater than 1/2 have a property called an electric quadruple moment, which creates a additional pathway for decoherence, meaning they lose their quantum state faster than when interacting with the electromagnetic noise inside the living tissue. Because nuclei with spin exactly 1/2 don't have their extra decoherence pathway. Or get this, all the biological essential elements. Only hydrogen and phosphorus have a half spin nuclei, right? Hydrogen is fully saturated in biology, handling 1,000 other jobs. But phosphorus, listen, Fisher argues that that element whose nuclear spin is available and stable enough to act as what he calls a neutral qubit or neural qubit, a quantum two-level system capable of storing quantum information inside a living neuron. Listen to that, right? Fisher also argued that he needed a protective structure because even phosphorus nuclear spin, when more stable than most, will decoherence quickly in free solution. He identified what he calls the Posner molecule, right? Go look it up. Because calcium phosphate in the ratio of C89 times PO4 times 6 as the unique molecule capable of shielding the phosphorus nuclear spin from environmental noise for biological relevant timescales. The Posner molecule acts as a quantum memory, not a computer chip, not a full quantum processor. A protective capsule that holds the entangled spin state long enough for it to influence neural activity, right? And here's my language block. Right? Picture a teeny armored capsule, right? Made of calcium and phosphate, right? Inside that capsule, phosphorus atoms are quantum entangled with each other, meaning their spin states are linked no matter what happens to the capsule afterward, right? Fisher's proposal was this: your own enzymes, your own enzymes accidentally build these capsules during totally ordinary chemical reactions that happens thousands of times a day in every living cell. The capsules protect the entanglement. The entanglement eventually influences which neurons fire and when. You didn't do anything unusual to make this happen. The biochemistry of basic metabolism might be running quantum cognition as a side effect of processes that existed long before anyone invented the word consciousness, right? You get it? Oh, you get it? Okay, all right. I see you. I see you. The mechanism chain runs precisely as follows, right? You have an enzyme. The enzyme breaks a pyrophosphate ion into two phosphate ions, right? And during this reaction, the phosphorus atoms in the two resulting phosphate ions can become quantum entangled, right? They're in the spin, right? Those entangled phosphate pairs get absorbed into Posner molecules, which protect the entanglement. The Posner molecules enter presynaptic neurons, right? And when two Posner molecules bind together and dissolve, they release intracellular calcium ions, triggering neurotransmitter release, which raises the probability of downstream neurons firing. The downstream neurons are not firing randomly. They're firing in patterns correlated by the entanglement that was established at the enzyme reaction. Multiple entangled Posner molecules triggering non-local correlations of neuron firing rates would provide the key mechanism for neural quantum processing, right? This is a non-local correlation. And that's entanglement actual technical designation, right? And Fisher is proposing it's operating inside your skull right now as you process what I'm saying. The question is whether the Posner molecule's protection is strong enough to hold that entanglement in a living neuron instead of a controlled lab solution, right? That was language block, right? Now, decoherence, right? We're going to talk about decoherence because every theory in this episode has the same energy, and the enemy has a name, and that name is decoherence, right? Because quantum states are fragile. The moment they interact with a noisy environment, warm, wet, crowded with molecules bouncing around at high thermal energy, the delicate superposition or entanglement collapses into ordinary classical behavior. And this is not a fringe objection. This is not the reaction of scientists who don't understand what Penrose and Fisher are proposing. This is basic quantum mechanics, tested tens of thousands of times in laboratories that spend millions of dollars cooling their equipment to fractions of a degree above absolute zero, shielding their systems from electromagnetic interference and isolating equipment from nearly every possible environmental interaction. They do all of this and still get coherence sometimes, right? And sometimes those are measured in microseconds to milliseconds before the quantum state degrades. Your brain operates at 37 degrees Celsius. It is predominantly water. It is biochemically dense, thermally active, and electromagnetically noise. Every neuron is surrounded by a warm ionic solution and a constant molecular motion. The thermal energy at body temperature is in order of a magnitude higher than what unprotected quantum coherence can survive for a biologically relevant timescale, right? Physicists, including David Desch, have argued against consciousness relevant quantum outcomes in the brain, favoring classical explanations for neural processing instead. The decoherence objection is not made by people who don't understand quantum mechanics. It is made by people who understand it well enough to know exactly how fragile these states are and exactly what kind of engineering is required to protect them, right? Posner's model has taken the direct fire on this precise point because in bulk water, Phosphorus-31 nuclear spin entanglement survives less than 1 second due to proton attack. 1 second, right? The number matters because the entire positive model depends on the protective molecule shielding. And that's the phosphorus spin from exactly that proton attack in a living, moving, biochemically active neuron. Not in a clean lab beaker, right? Under controlled conditions. No. And whether the positive molecule actually provides the protection in a real neuron has not been experimentally confirmed as of this moment of our show, right? Experimental evidence has, in fact, directly challenged the assumptions that phosphorus-31 nuclear spin entanglement meditates consciousness, right? And here's a cost confession, right? We haven't talked about it, but let's get into it, right? Here's the cost confession, right? And let me be specific about the cost of getting this wrong and getting it wrong publicly, because this is the part nobody ever who's covering this will say out loud with a real number attached. And I've seen online courses priced between $300 to $800 that claim to teach you how to rewire your quantum coherence, how to entangle your consciousness with abundance, how to leverage quantum superposition for manifestation. Some have sold hundreds of thousands of copies, and what they're doing is taking a genuinely unresolved debate between serious physicists and using the credibility of the word quantum. Everybody's quantum. You say the word quantum, then people think you're smart, right? Quantum to dress ordinary motivational content in specific sounding language. The actual physicists publishing in this space are arguing that about microseconds and molecular shielding in peer-reviewed articles. And they're not claiming any of this gives you leverage over your income or your outcomes, right? They claim that that was invented by someone who needed a premium price point and found a convenient theory to borrow from. I'm sorry. I'm here to tell the truth, right? I'm here to tell the truth. So, and here's my latest block, right? Here's my latest block. The skeptics are not saying quantum mechanics is fake. They're saying quantum mechanics is real, and it predicts your brain is too hot and too wet to keep these effects alive long enough to matter. That's a serious engineering objection, not a philosophical dismissal. Both camps agree on what the physics says. They disagree on whether the biology can hold the physics together long enough to be relevant. The entire live debate in this field right now is fight over microseconds and molecular shielding. That's the honest state of the conversation, right? That's the honest state of the conversation. That was my language spot. Right? Now, I hope everybody is enjoying the information. And look, the layman block, listen, man, the layman's block is where it's at. That's the business, right? That's the business, because everything else, I know, man. I sound like that Charlie Brown professor giving instruction in their class, talking about some wah. I get it, man. But it's necessary, right? We got to get through it. So let's continue on. How much time I got left? I might go over. I'm going over. It's okay. Right? It's going. It's over. So we talked about 3 models, right? Right? And we talked about 1 contested data set, right? And we have the zero definitive proof in any direction. And this is the honest state of the field as of right now on this particular date, July 1st, year of our Lord, 2026. And that's not a disappointing conclusion, right? That's the actual frontier. Because most of what gets treated as settled science was once exactly this messy, exactly this contested, exactly this far from resolution. And the people who built useful frameworks during the messy phase were the ones who mattered most when resolution arrived. The question for tonight's synthesis is not which model is right. The question has no answer tonight. The question is, what does a sovereign operator do with three competing unresolved frameworks while waiting for the physics to settle? Because the physics settling is not a precondition for building governance. It's a luxury the governance timeline cannot afford to wait for, right? It can't. There's some projects that I'm working on right now, several white papers, 14 white papers I'm working on right now to date, right? And one of the doctrines treats unresolved foundational science the way a structural engineer treats uncertain soil conditions. It's characterized by the full range of possibilities and is built to perform adequately across the entire range. And it monitors continuously for new data that shifts the range. And you don't build for one geological scenario and hope the others don't apply, right? We applied that to tonight's three models and sequence. The OR winds and consciousness is gravity triggered collapse and microtubules. The governor's challenge is a mechanism physically inseparable from biological life itself. There is no external access point in the ordinary sense. The governance response in that case is biological. What interventions alter microtubule functions? What pharmaceutical and electromagnetic environments degrade or enhance the mechanism? And who controls those environments? Because if Fisher wins and consciousness runs on phosphorus nuclear spin and Posner molecules, the governance challenge is different in character. Posner molecules are transportable. They form from extracellular calcium and phosphate and enter neurons through normal biological pathways. A transportable quantum memory is a targetable quantum memory. What enters the presynaptic chemical environment shapes which Posner molecules form and what entanglement they carry into the neuron. That's a vector for influence at the molecular level that governance has to reckon with explicitly and structurally, not reactively, right? Because if CEMI wins and consciousness is an electromagnetic field, then the governance challenge is the most immediately actionable thing because the external interaction technology already exists and is already in clinical use. The governance question isn't hypothetical under CEMI. It's whether current TMS regulatory frameworks are adequate for governing deliberate interaction with the medium of conscious experience itself. Because under CEMI theory, the answer would be clearly a no. Full stop. And that's a regulatory gap that needs to be named, right? It needs to be named right now. And here's my name is Block. We're almost done, all right? Think about this. One governance structure needs to be robust enough to cover all three scenarios simultaneously because we don't know which is correct and may not know for years. Building governance that only applies if Fisher is right, and then discovering CEMI was the mechanism is not a better outcome than building no governance at all. You need a framework that treats the permission structure itself as the protected object, not the specific physical mechanism underneath it, which decides what accesses the substrate of your consciousness under what conditions, with what oversight, and with what reversibility. Those questions don't change based on whether the substrate is gravity, phosphorus, or a field, right? That's what the sovereignty stack was built to answer, regardless of which mechanism the physics eventually confirms, right? That was my lamest block, right? So let's get ready to end, right? You know, most episodes, and I know I only got an hour. I only got an hour, right? So most episodes, end with a single insight, right? Tonight we're going to end with a posture, right? Because insights are passive, and what tonight's content demands is active, right? It's active. The physics is unsettled. The governance window is open, right? The exploitation is already running. The posture is what a sovereign operator holds when all three of these things are simultaneously true and none of them resolves on your preferred timeline, right? First, let's hold the uncertainty without performing certainty in either direction. This means actively resisting two equally wrong responses that your environmental or social environment will push forward or toward it, right? The first wrong response is enthusiasm without rigor. Quantum consciousness is real. This confirms everything I believed about the mind. I'm going to post about it, right? Tonight, confirm nothing. So don't post. Don't post. Tonight, built the case for three competing models and documented the evidence against each of them with equal seriousness, right? Enthusiasm without rigor makes you exactly the kind of person the risk vector exploits. And we talked about that earlier, right? The second wrong response is defensive dismissal. And this is all speculation, right? Show me the peer-reviewed proof, and I'll stick with what's established. The researchers publishing OR updates in Frontiers in 2026. The researchers developing experimental tests of Fisher's Posner's model. The CEMI field theorists producing testable predictions for TMS interaction effects. They are the peer-reviewed literature. Dismissal without entanglement or engagement does not make you rigorous. It makes you easy to blindside when the resolution arrives and the governance window has already closed. The sovereign posture is harder than both of those and less comfortable than either. You stay in the uncertainty. You track the specific claims being made and the specific evidence for and against each one. You don't resolve the discomfort by picking a team. You hold the full picture, including the parts that remain unanswered, and you build around the uncertainty instead of waiting for it to resolve. Second, you monitor who profits from collapsing this uncertainty prematurely and which direction, because that's important. Because commercial interests have incentives to declare quantum consciousness proven because belief sells products. Institutional interests have incentives to dismiss it as pseudoscience because acknowledging a live debate requires developing governance positions that institutions are not ready to develop. Both incentive structures are running right now. Watch the motivation behind the certainty claim, not just the certainty claim, right? Not just the certainty claim. And third, apply the sovereignty lens forward regardless of mechanism. And here's the governance question, right? Who gets access to the substrate underneath your consciousness and under what conditions? Does that not change based on which model wins? It is the same question whether the substrate is microtubule, a Posner molecule, or an electromagnetic field. The governance architecture needs to be built now, right? Not after the physics settles, because the physics settling and the commercial exploitation beginning may happen in the same news cycle. The window does not stay open indefinitely. The posture is informed, unresolved, and already building, right? Listen, 8 episodes, 8 weeks, 8 technical layers of consciousness internet built from the hardware substrate in MW28 to the quantum foundation in MW28. Arc 4 is complete, not tentatively closed, not paused pending for further data. not subject to revision if the next paper changes the landscape, but completed, documented, locked into permanent record of the merged living white paper, and it's going down tonight, right after this broadcast, right? The consciousness internet is built as a framework. What comes next is governance. Season Arc 5, the declaration is open. The main show declared it tonight, right? 29 episodes remaining in season 4 before the harvest begins at episode 300. If you understand what the declaration means architecturally, you understand this arc does not carry the weight of potential. It carries the weight of completion. You don't declare what you might become. You declare what you are. The tone of every episode from this point forward in season 4 is shaped by that distinction. Merger Wednesdays follows next Wednesday with Merger 29. And we're going to be talking about the 4 layers of consciousness sovereignty. The first episode of Merger Wednesdays owned Arc 5, opening on the foundation of the premise of tonight's episode that's completed. Not a week behind, not a week later, right? But I'm sorry, a week later. Because the foundation needed to be verified before the governance layer could be laid on top of it. The concrete cured tonight. Interior work begins next Wednesday. The building stands, right? The building stands. The brass tacks echoes, not reinforced, confirmed by everything the episode just built. Entanglement doesn't ask permission. It doesn't care about your borders, your bandwidth, or your consent form. If your mind runs on it, somebody else already owns the spec sheet, right? And that's not a metaphor anymore, because tonight it's a physics statement backed by 3 competing scientific models, 1 contested data sheet, decades of legitimate peer-reviewed argument, and 0 resolution. The substrate may be gravity. It may be phosphorus. It may be a field. And in every scenario, it is indifferent to the concept of privacy, not hostile to it, not protective of it, but indifferent. The substrate does not protect your consciousness, and it does not expose it. It simply does not recognize the category. Sovereignty is not written into the physics. It has to be written into the architecture built deliberately on top of the physics. And that's the declaration. That's the work. And that's why this show exists. Smarts, you just held 3 unresolved scientific frameworks simultaneously for this entire show without demanding premature verdict. That's the discipline. Final Boss's 8 weeks of Arc 4, you were in a room for all of it. The community carried this research from infrastructure to quantum physics from day 1, right? 1 episode at a time. Motivators, take tonight's uncomfortable verdict into whatever you're building and build faster, not slower. Warriors, you have been equipped. The ground is laid. The sovereignty stakes are named. The red team risks are documented, right? Be in the room next Wednesday. Be in the room next Wednesday for Merger 29. We're going to be talking about the 4 layers of consciousness and sovereignty. Merger Wednesday Arc 5 opens. The declaration is live. It is go time, baby. It is go time. Right? Ladies and gentlemen, that is our show. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a part of the show. Thank you for being a part of the journey. That, my friends, is Merger Wednesdays, right? And as always, there's a heavy pain that comes with discipline, but there's an even heavier pain that comes with regret, right? And if I don't see you again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That is our show. That is our show. Be here tomorrow night, 9 p.m. for special guest Thursdays. For special guest Thursdays, right? Tomorrow, 9 p.m., right? Be balanced, be equal, and be smart. That's our show. Y'all have a great one. And I will talk to you very soon, man. Very, very soon. See you then.
It's Merger Wednesday. The countdown continues. 7 years until the convergence of biology and machine. Neural interfaces are no longer theory, they're the scaffolding of a new consciousness. But what does that mean for identity? For free will, for the soul? This is where we build the frameworks for ethical, philosophical, and spiritual growth for the next phase of human evolution. We're not just upgrading hardware, we're rewriting what it means to be human. Each week we explore the biotech breakthroughs, decode the cognitive shifts, and prepare the mind for the merge. This isn't about fear, it's about readiness. Because the future isn't waiting. It's already wiring in. This is about preparing human consciousness for the most significant leap in our species' history. If you think this is just about chips and brains, you're not ready. But we'll get you there, one Wednesday at a time. So sit back and relax as we take you on a journey on Merger Wednesday.